Hey, what's going on, Miguel? The host of Life of Circle Radio. Welcome. Happy Monday night. And so we're going to jump into this thing because we have an interview that we're going to run with a rabbi from Israel. He was on the show about a month ago when the conflict first jumped off, and we wanted to bring him back because he didn't get an opportunity to really share a lot of his position. So we just got him and him alone. So we're gonna talk to him here in a couple of minutes. But at the top of the show, man, we got to talk about all of these new sexual assault allegations. Diddy, I think, is up to 3 now. Aaron Hall has come out. Jamie Foxx has come out. And I was like, it was last week. It was like Thursday or Friday. I'm like, why are all these people getting accused all at one time? So we're going to talk about this law in New York, which basically gave them up until Thanksgiving to Adult Survivor Act in order to file these. So a lot of folks have been filing, and so we'll talk about that. Luther Campbell, Luther Campbell, Two Live Crew, for people don't know, he was kind of early on with this thing. He said from the jump, they've been signing releases. Ain't nobody coming up in my joint acting wild. We got head dances and the view wild. So it's like there's decorum. There's decorum in strip club culture. So we'll talk about that. But anyway, that's kind of where we're going. So we're gonna do ratchet first. We're gonna do ratchet first, and then we're gonna get to some serious on the back end. So, super producer,
what's up? Did you have a good Thanksgiving?
I did. We were out in the MI, crooked letter I, humpback I.
And where were you? You were on a. He was on a plantation.
I was not on no daggone plantation. Stop it. So
my estate plantation too. It's beautiful. Honestly, it's no joke. It's beautiful.
My man's got it. My brother has a house out there. My brother-in-law has a house, and it's obviously it's a house that used to be owned by a doctor. They bought it, and it's got a couple of little houses, smaller houses, and
slave cabins. But wait, y'all, listen, I'm messing with him, but let's call a spade a spade. It's got a master house, and it's got these slave cabins in the back, and there's like a really beautiful like fountain, probably a fire. Is it a fire pit that's back there now in the middle? It looks like a fire
pit. Where you get these visuals from? I don't remember us taking no pictures or sending out no videos.
You walked me around the property when I called you and Tracy for Christmas last year.
Okay, well he's got a little pool in the middle, and he's got these two houses, and he's got some acreage in the back. Your man's right here, bullseye with the crossbow. Come on, big time.
Oh, crossbow?
Come on, big time. And
that's
I was
impressive.
like, but then after the fact, he was like, oh yeah. And then he showed me pictures of a deer he took down with that same crossbow. I was like, oh, you killed deer with this crossbow I'm using? Okay, well, all right.
And then your girl out here messing up mac and cheese in an epic way. So much so that Tracy was like, don't you ever post that. Tracy has not been that mad at me since I post my underwear on accident on Facebook years ago. She ain't been that mad since then.
Nah, because Tracy don't play about her mac and cheese. Nobody in this house or any houses that's associated with this family knows that if Trey's around, she's handling the mac and cheese. Now, she didn't do mac and cheese on this trip, but because we was traveling, whatever. But when you posted them naked noodles out there outside of it was like, yo, hold up. Them noodles ain't got no cheese, no nothing on the girl. What? I
had to explain it, but listen, if you are making, quick tip before we move into what's going on, if you are making any kind of dessert, something has to be under said dessert, because if it's not, it leaks into the bottom of your oven and basically catches your oven on fire. Yeah. So I had to learn that the hard way. So let's get into it.
So anyway, so as we was out and I'm pulling up on social, and I'm just like, I'm literally like, I was on IG and every story was somebody else with sexual assault allegations. It was Jamie Foxx, it was Diddy, it was Aaron Hall, it was who else did I see? Jimmy Iovine, who was
Jimmy
in partnership.
Luke, Steven Tyler, Jamie
not Luke.
Foxx.
Luke said, "Luke, you're not gonna get me." Luke has something to say, but he ain't gonna do. But go ahead.
So it was some major players in the entertainment business who are now facing sexual assault charges, and the reason why is because the final wave of the sex abuse lawsuits as the 1-year window closes in New York. So what Miguel was seeing, and what a lot of us are seeing, like what is happening, is that from last November until this November 25th at midnight, no, 24th at midnight,
right,
you were able to file civil suit charges against anybody who's, if you were sexually assaulted or claimed to be sexually assaulted, even if your statute of limitations has ended. So let's say the statute of limitations was 7 years. This reopened the window for the short period of time to sue them civilly.
Yeah, and so we ran down.
They're only showing this final wave, though. They're not showing what's happened from last November to now.
Well, they're
God
saying
knows
right now,
what happened.
This is the New York Times. Since the Adult Survivors Act was passed, more than 3,000 civil suits have been filed, some aimed at politicians and other institutions, including hospitals and jails. Now, here's the thing. We ran down the blacklist, but including this list is also former Governor Andrew Cuomo, current mayor of New York, Eric Adams, is also included. So, you know, when you think about this.
Is Donald on there? He's got to be on there.
I don't know. Believe me, if Donald Trump's name was on this list, but his suits had already came in. We already dealing with enough of it, I'm pretty sure, you know. But, yeah, man, this is interesting what is going on. I mean, folks better get their ish together. Because if you got some history, because the first one that kind of grabbed me when I saw the Jamie Foxx, I'm like, oh, Lord. They ain't getting Jamie. Come on, man. They ain't getting Jamie. But Jamie been real smart most of his career. He seems to always have stayed out of that type of situation.
He has. And the woman who is claiming that she was sexually assaulted, she actually tried to file charges against him a couple of years ago, maybe, I want to say maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I'll pull up the article later if we have time. And her charges were dismissed. Like the judge was like, this is a he said, she said, we can't do nothing about this. And they were dismissed. So now she's jumping on the bandwagon. And now Jamie basically can file a defamation lawsuit because your charges were already dismissed. Nobody believed it then. So now you're trying to get money out of the situation. He can sue her for defamation. And I think he plans to. He's made it very clear, I plan to sue you. Like, you cannot do this over and over again. And he's right.
Yeah. And that has to happen because especially it has to happen if they're wrong, if the allegations are false. And here's why I say it has to happen. Because the speed at which Diddy paid off Cassie, and let's not forget Bill Cosby. And I don't know if that was in New York as well, but he got another 1 or 2 allegations too. But
that probably was in New York. It only makes sense.
Right. So the speed of Cassie getting paid has really, you know, could also be a part of a contributing factor to these folks deciding that they want to do what they're doing. So, but let's make sure that we're very clear, because I don't want to get accused of, oh, you're not believing black women and you're not believing. No, this is not what I'm saying. This is not what this is. So let's stop jumping on that bandwagon with the quickness, right? Because here's the thing. Like, for example, Aaron Hall has been associated with Diddy. Now, going back, for people who don't know the history, early on in the late 80s, early 90s, that was the, you know, Uptown MCA. You're talking about Andre Harrell. Diddy was an intern. Jodeci was on there. Mary J. Blige was in that circle, and Guy as well. And so when Aaron Hall comes out, and I'm not gonna play that video because he's too going hard on it.
He's disgusting. He's disgusting is what the word Miguel's looking for.
Right. Ew. But it's old. Like, I saw that video probably 7 or 10 years ago because it was an interview he did with Bishop Don Juan, who's a known to be hip hop pimp. And it was some show, I think it was on Vlad TV.
It was on Vlad.
It was on Vlad. And so Aaron is talking about, you know, women know they come to me, what's going to happen to them. He got a warning tattoo on his arm, and he talking about how he well endowed and what he going to do and blah, 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 blah.
He even put in a song. He's got a song that I thought, and I asked Miguel, because Miguel's a hip hop head. Yeah. And this song is before my time slightly. I might have been 8 when this song came out. Right. And it's a song from Above the Rim, right?
It's Above the Rim with Tupac was in it. It's called Don't Be Afraid. It was Aaron Hall's first solo record after leaving Guy. And
it's a rape song. It's a rape anthem. And when you were listening to reading the words of these lyrics, I'm blown away that this made the soundtrack of a movie, and no one even, that's how you know hip hop is, and music industry is sick. That no one thought, well, you know, this really shouldn't be a song, sir. Like, what made you even think of this?
Yeah, but one, a lot of people were not really listening to lyrics, music in general, and I can't speak for for the most part, non-black music. I just keep it real. I don't know what country music artists are doing and singing and whatever in their music. But going back through my entire, pretty much from outside of my generation, there's always gonna be artists that's gonna be saying stuff, and I'm gonna be like cringing. And I have to honestly, full disclosure, almost question myself right now because I have cut R. Kelly so much out of I don't think about, and I think the biggest difference with R. Kelly, to be honest with you, is the circulation of the video. And let me finish my thought. My point is, I won't say Aaron Hall is as bad as R. Kelly, because he ain't got stuff on video, at least not the stuff that we have seen. But the stuff with R. Kelly was underage children, and that was that's probably the difference. But Aaron Hall, man, has been known to be grimy for years, and it's like, and I've gotten to the point. I saw, he came. The guy came to town with New Edition last year when they came. Aaron Hall's funny. He ain't really hardly sing nothing. He just walked around. He can't do his runs no more. His voice is trash in comparison to how he used to be. But he was always known to be that guy. But the thing about it that I want to make is that people are always, this in today's conversation, it's really about, oh, I can't believe that, black men ain't defending black women and we not defending women and blah, 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 blah. Okay, here's the thing, guys. People like Diddy and Aaron Hall have never wanted women. Women, they've always had access to women, right? And so if they're so controlling and narcissistic as they are, those type of men don't struggle, because I know a lot of them. I've hung out with a lot of them. I know a lot of dudes who kind of run like that. And Kia, you before you got married,
yeah,
you these type of men are not. There are plenty of dudes out there running around in the streets always, and their whole line of getting to women is, this is how endowed I am. This is blah 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 blah. I mean, and there's women that's gonna flock to that.
There are. I have dated athletes. I have dated off and on rappers, businessmen. Before I had 3 kids and a husband, I was gorgeous and thin and fabulous and in college. So I get it. And you run into these men all the time. And the weirdest thing about them is that they think they are untouchable. And in some cases, it's true. They can do and say whatever they want, and no one seems to care, and no one seems to notice or want to notice or turn the other way. And that's very scary. I was listening to Melissa Ford, and the vixen
Melissa Ford, correct?
Who has never gotten knocked up and never been like promiscuous and dated any rappers. She made a comment on the Joe Budden. I mean like had like a string of rappers where she's dating back to back.
You know what? I think in my mind I'm going to Superhead. I might be mixing her up, but
you're mixing up your video vixens, very much so.
but Melissa Ford, Dave, we probably go back her history. Go ahead, finish your point.
But she was on Joe Budden and she was making a comment, and I think the guy was trying to ask her, "Hey, Melissa, have you ever been in a sexually abused situation with somebody famous?" And you could tell she wanted to say yes, and she was choosing her words very specifically. Yeah. Like I've been around these guys. I've seen what they do. And then everybody got quiet. So these men, they do exist.
They exist. Can we stop fronting and acting like dudes like Diddy and dudes like Aaron Hall and these type of dudes who out here, what's up, mom, blah, 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 boom, 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 boom. And some women get to giggling, and that's what they want. And then all of a sudden now, 30 years later, it's just like, oh, Diddy was a monster. Everybody knew Diddy was a monster. Diddy was known for throwing some of the biggest parties in D.C. because he was there. People want to be around people like Diddy. And this was long before he the Diddy we know now. When he was in college at Howard, he was just a student who threw dope parties at Howard University with Mark Barnes and the boys in D.C. And then now he became who he is. So, and that's not to excuse their behavior, because if he's a criminal, if he's out there drugging women and raping women, then go to jail, bottom line.
What you're basically saying is that he has been used to this type of lifestyle for a very, very long time. So he gradually got worse and worse. But before we deep dive into this, we do have a huge interview that we do need to get to. So
we do. But I want to put a bow on this thing and saying that as this continues to grow and this continues to surface, there's a conversation around accountability on both sides, men and women, that needs to be had. And I'm actually, kind of noodling on it. I want to maybe grab a couple of men and sit around and we do an interview to do a show that I want to put together probably here in Atlanta. So I'm working on that, but just giving it some thought. We can't then all of a sudden just throw our hands up like, oh, we all knew and Diddy's so terrible and Aaron Hall is so terrible. All the Diddy's and Aaron Halls with no money are still running around in these streets and got plenty of women who want a piece of them. So let's stop with the nonsense. All right, so we're gonna move on to this conversation. So our guest, and so let me make sure I cue this up. So we had matter of fact, you cue up our guest because you wanted me to have, and I was with it 100% because we wanted to continue this conversation about how Black people are supposed to deal with this conversation, what's going on in Israel.
So we're super excited to have Rabbi Yehuda. We're gonna go through this. Hayukin, back on the show. He was on our show a couple of weeks ago when the conflict in Israel first started. He had a very unique perspective. He is living in the West Bank. He is pro-Zionist Israel and Jewish, but also wants the Palestinians to live in peace with them together because they are part of this land. His perspective is unique and great. I'm so happy that he can come back onto the show. So we are going to have a great conversation, not only about anti-Semitism, but kind of how he's feeling right now with the war and where the next steps are. So we're excited to bring him on.
Yeah, so this is a pre-recorded interview, so we're not gonna sit back like he's here live. So I don't think you can just put in some stuff in the chat. And he's gonna respond.
I was trying to pretend like he was here live. Since the reason why me and Miguel wore the same clothes.
I'm already in my mind like think about how we're gonna kick this interview up, and that ain't gonna work. All right, here we go. Here's our interview we did earlier today. All right, welcome back to Life on Circle Radio. As we mentioned, we had Brother Rabbi Yehuda on our program about a month ago when we talked about the Israeli conflict and it having started on October the 7th. And we wanted to get perspectives. And we had a big conversation, but Brother Yehuda had it. He blessed us and said he'll come back and let's continue this conversation. You're with the Kohen?
No, I am the Kohen.
You are the Kohen. Let's start there. What does that mean? When you say you're the Kohen, what does that mean?
It means that it means the priest, actually. Means if you know a little bit about the characters in the Bible, I'm a direct descendant of Aaron, who's the brother of Moses.
Okay.
So all of the male descendants of Aaron are called Kohanim. Each one is a Kohen. So I am. On my mountain, I'm the only Kohen, which means I have special responsibilities on my mountain to the community, and so I'm known as Yehuda the Kohen, which in Hebrew would be HaKohen.
Got it. Well, thank you for that information and clarity. So as we talked during our conversation, we obviously have a huge conflict which is going on there in Israel and Gaza and in the whole region. Kind of give us your perspective. Let's start there. We want to get your perspective on what is going on as best you can explain it here.
Well, look, my perspective more broadly is that for the last 100+ years, Jews and Palestinians have been locked in a conflict, and it's not even the same conflict. We're actually experiencing two completely different conflicts. We're each living in our subjective perspective of reality. We don't agree on what the conflict is even about. We're for the most part, I think, telling the truth when it comes to ourselves, our own identities, our own stories. But I think we both get the other so completely wrong that it not only makes reconciliation impossible, but I think it causes us both to adopt very counterproductive methods of struggle in terms of fighting the other. And I think one of the great examples of this is actually what's going on now. Hamas doesn't just talk about Israel as if we're like some European settler colony. They deeply believe it. And when they fight Israel, they adopt anti-colonial methods of struggle, which are generally very effective when you colonizer, like whether we're talking about the French in Algeria or the Americans in Afghanistan, or even in Palestine. The Jews fought a 10-year urban guerrilla struggle against the British in the 1940s. And when the British left this country in 1948, they said officially that they left because of Jewish terrorism, meaning that we made the price of occupation more expensive than the benefits of exploitation. Therefore, the occupier left. Now, in Hamas's mind, Israel is just the British, the French, the Americans. We're just like another um, foreign ruler that doesn't belong here and has no roots here, and therefore they fight us using these tactics. But because Israelis, even if we want to argue that they're right, we don't know that, meaning Jews deeply, deeply self-identify as native to this land, as deeply rooted in this land, as having nowhere else to be, nowhere else to go. And therefore, when attacked using these tactics, we strike back like a native people with superior firepower that feels threatened. So it's just one example. It goes in both directions. But I think, one of the reasons why we haven't been able to end this conflict in over 100 years is because we're both very deeply threatened by the other's story. And a lot of the work I'm involved in around here is really bringing some of the most radical Jews and Palestinians together to try and get each to recognize the story and narrative and identity of the other as the other experiences it. Because ultimately, my goal is to create a bigger story that's inclusive enough to encompass both ostensibly rival stories. So we're not the antagonist in each other's movie, but really the co-protagonist in the same movie.
So when you're looking at this bottom line, kind of the key, and I'm coming straight to you.
Okay.
A good way to wrap this up is that you have two groups of folks who believe this is our home, and these people, the British, the English, the American, they have determined something that we need to determine ourselves. And we say, as Palestinians, this is our land. Israelis say, this is our land, and that's where the crux of the conflict is.
Right, and we're both defining our identities and our connection to this land very differently, which is actually good news because ultimately it means we're not really in competition. For example, when Jews talk about Jewish identity, we really relate to ourselves as one giant family. Like most Jews in the world, trace their lineage back to a very specific set of ancestors who are actually buried in Hebron. Abraham, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Leah. Rachel is buried nearby Bethlehem. So when we talk about our identity, our national identity, we're talking about a family that got bigger and bigger and bigger through 12 tribes. Or I'm a Kohen, which is one of the sub-tribes of Rabbi, so I know what ancient Hebrew tribe I come from. In my experience, I have about 15 years of experience working with Palestinians. When they talk about Palestinian identity, it doesn't mean that. They really just mean the indigenous peoples of Palestine throughout time, including ancient Israelites, my ancestors, including Canaanites, including Philistines, including Crusaders who just kind of stuck around and absorbed into local populations. So we're both defining national identity in very different ways, which right now is a source of contention because we're arguing past each other and not even understanding what the other's saying. But if we could actually listen to each other and try to understand what the other is saying, there would actually be space, I think, for us both to be able to express our identities and our connection to this land simultaneously in a way that doesn't really conflict with one another.
So I think this ties into the original reason why I asked you to come back on the show, and that is, anti-Semitism, which has it's never gone away, but it has morphed over the years. And I think one of the things I find most interesting in it, because me and Miguel are both Christian, and we've always known that Jewish people came from Israel and the Middle East. That's never been something that we haven't known. But it seems like a lot of people, Middle Easterners who may not know Palestinians, are like, you don't belong here. It's like they're going off of the Jewish people who now live in Europe, who present more white than they do, brown or complexion, if that makes sense. It makes me wonder, how did that morph from all of us knowing that Jewish people came from Israel to now, they're only white people that live in Europe, and that's who we're fighting against?
First of all, it's important to note that the Ashkenazi Jews, the Jews who spent the last almost 2,000 years in Europe, were actually the Jews who were in Judea during the Second Temple period. We were the ones who fought the Romans over and over again, like the Great Revolt, the Masada, the Bar Kokhba Revolt. Like those were the Jews who were essentially conquered by the Romans and sold into slavery and ended up in Rome, in Russia, in France, in Germany, and places like that. And that's what we call the Ashkenazim, as opposed to Jews who had already been in other parts of West Asia, and did not return to Judea for the Second Temple period. Those are what we today call Mizrahim. And so Israeli society is probably roughly half-half. The Jews living in Israel today are roughly a mix of both. And a lot of the families today are really a mix, meaning usually you have one parent who's this, one parent who's that. It's very common, especially among Jews in the West Bank, which might be counterintuitive because the sense of Jewish national consciousness is so strong among Jews in the West Bank that there's very little distinction, between a Jew from Ethiopia, a Jew from India, a Jew from Russia, a Jew from America, a Jew from Morocco, or a Jew from Afghanistan. It doesn't matter. Everybody kind of marries each other, and the kids just kind of come out like little this, little that, and we're because our primary layer of identity is Jewish or Israelite or I'm a uh, but but really, I think that in general, Jewish identity is complicated for a lot of people who are not us. I think our story is a very complicated story. There's no other example I could think of an ancient civilization that was destroyed. It actually maintained its identity in gas form for 2,000 years and then came back to life as a solid in the land it had been displaced from, like revived its language, liberated its land, took possession of its land. Like it's like a fantasy movie, really, when you think about like the story of Jewish people. And no one else really shares that story. You don't see any other ancient civilization that was destroyed coming back to life, at least not yet. And so I think it's very hard for people to understand who we are. And it's much easier, I think, for a lot of people to just kind of look at us through the lens they're used to, with like the dominant lenses in Western civilization, and say, oh, Jews are the people who believe in such and such religion. Some of them might be, ethnic Russians, or some of them might be Moroccans, or some of them might be Ethiopians. But what they share is a religion, not a national identity, not a shared ancestry. So that's really like the big disagreement. The question is, are the Jewish people today, are we those people who believe in the Bible, or are we the characters from the Bible? And I think it's a very dramatic event. The people of Israel,
dig into that a little bit deeper. Could you dig into that a little bit deeper for me?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I
think that's where people get confused.
Yeah.
People, well, Miguel, just what you just said about, are we the characters from the Bible, or are we a religion? I think that's how you just said it, and I think that's where there's a lot of confusion coming in. Because I've actually heard people say, being Jewish, that's not a race, and I'm like, but it is. They're like, no, it's not. It's just a religion. I'm like, that's not true. So can you just explain that a little bit more?
I think to be accurate, I think it's probably helpful to say that my people, really predate a lot of those social constructs. I think we've been around longer than the concept of race, longer than the concept of religion, longer than the concept of nationalism. I think I would say that we're an ancient civilization, maybe similar to the Aztecs. Maybe that would be a good, parallel. We've always had a spiritual component, a legal component, a national component, a territorial component, a spiritual component, but we're more than the sum of those parts. And I think that what happened to a lot of Jews, let's be honest, what happened to a lot of Jews in Europe around the time of the French Revolution is we had been suffering for centuries from very, very traumatic years of persecution. It's no secret. And to the point that attaining whiteness became a very sought after objective.
Goal.
Right. It was beneficial. It was beneficial to peace, I'm assuming.
Right. Like we were basically the like non-white people in Europe who were constantly being persecuted. And finally, at a certain point around the time of the Enlightenment, the Germans, the French offered us inclusion, offered us citizenship, offered us to be considered German and French if we would rebrand ourselves, if we would say, okay, we're no longer Palestinian refugees struggling to go home as we had been for 1,700 years, but to actually redefine ourselves as Germans with a religion called Judaism. This is really the birth of Judaism as a religion. Before that, we were just in exile, wanting to go home, organizing our communities. We had these like ghetto communities separate from the dominant host nations. And we would organize our communities according to a portable version of the national culture we left behind in our land. And And what basically happened was, after so much trauma and so much persecution, when we were offered the opportunity to be included, we really grabbed, some of us at least, grabbed it and said, yes, we are now Germans of the Mosaic persuasion, or Frenchmen with a religion called Judaism. Napoleon, for example, was very adamant. He said, I want to give you rights, but I just need to be convinced you don't see yourselves as a nation other than French. We want to make sure you guys are Frenchmen with a Jewish religion and not a Jewish people that happen to be in France. So, the Jews in France at the time, I guess they thought they were lying to Napoleon, and they said, no, we're Frenchmen with a Jewish religion, because they just wanted to achieve, rights. But really, it got very confusing for us internally. And I think if we fast forward to the situation in America, in the last 130 years, Jews have been in the United States, a certain, critical mass of Jews. It's the second Jewish community in the world, or maybe it's almost tied with Israel for the biggest. And Jews in America have really, just because of everything we had gone through, we really wanted to downplay the unique features of our identity that made us different from the dominant host nation, and try to pass. And really, but before World War II, it was very challenging for us. Before World War II, Jews were really considered other in American society. But after World War II, Jews were basically offered conditional whiteness through things like the GI Bill, along with like Italians, Irish, etc. And since then, I think our identity has become very confusing. I think I'm of the belief that one of the main objectives of this chapter of Jewish history is decolonizing Jewish identity, really applying post-colonial tools to Jewish identity, understanding what we've been through, understanding how we need to heal. Now that we have power again for the first time in 2,000 years, what kind of society do we want to create? How do we relate to the world? I think these are really important questions that we haven't dealt with yet. I think we came back to our land traumatized, extremely traumatized, and we haven't yet unpacked all that we've been through, and we haven't yet clarified for ourselves what kind of society we want to create, and maybe even what kind of world we want to contribute to
You said a lot, and I appreciate all of it. There's a couple of things that when I have dialogues like this that you brought up, as you're here with two African Americans. As African Americans, we don't have the choice to decide that we're going to meld into a community and just be right. We know that race is a construct, right? It's we have great Italian restaurants and great French restaurants and communities. You go to New York and you've got areas where you may have a Jewish community or a Russian community or things of that nature, right? And we appreciate that piece. And you clarify something that I've always kind of understood. One good thing about this conversation, we're trying to have an understanding on this world, this worldly conversation. It sounds to me that the Jewish community in Israel is looking for the Palestinians to accept nationhood the way you guys accepted nationhood in Europe, whether it was France or Germany or wherever, where it's almost as if, Israel is the nation and you can be a Palestinian Israeli, or I don't know how the term would be. Are you following my logic here?
It's a little bit more complicated than that.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
I would say the Zionist movement of, let's say, the late 1800s really took European nationalism, which was actually kind of like an enemy ideology. It was used either to oppress us or to assimilate us. So I would say that nationalism was very much a threat to us, but we kind of took it, or the Zionist movement took it and created like a Jewish version of it. And that was kind of called Zionism, like a European style nationalism, but a Jewish flavor. Ironic, because European nationalism was actually based on the ancient Israelites. So you have the Jewish people taking a copy of a copy, or at least some of the people take kind of creating a copy of a copy. And that's, by the way, a lot of the friction that you might have seen in Israeli society over the last year is between, it's really important to understand that when talking about Israeli society is not a Western society. But and a lot of people make the mistake of trying to apply Western framings like left, right, religious, secular, liberal, conservative onto Israeli society, and it doesn't really fit. Like
Okay.
our identity is complicated than that. And I think what we've been seeing over the last year in Israeli society has been a conflict between those who are really invested in the copy of like ancient Israeli national consciousness versus those who just want to go back to the original and really be our authentic selves. And that's like been friction in Israeli society. It ended on October 7th because on October 7th, Hamas attacked us and committed really unspeakable atrocities that pretty much reminded everybody, hey, wait a minute, like this petty fight we've been having with each other is ridiculous compared to this potential threat that exists and that we have to kind of fight. But before that, we were tearing each other apart. Like we were like Israeli society was really um, in a bad state. I think that,
Similar to the
but that's
U.S.
yeah, but that's really I think um, there's a certain I would say Israel's ruling class today. When we're talking about our political leadership, our military leadership, our journalists, our Supreme Court justices, our academics, et cetera, and of course, most of the people who control the economy in our country really want to see Israel be part of the West or allied to the West. Whereas you have the what I would say the Israeli masses aren't consciously trying to be more like our neighbors, but we just are. Like it's just like we kind of fit in more as an organic part of the region, and I think that just like led to a lot of friction recently. What's ironic is that when the press talks about Israeli society and Israeli politics, they often refer to the westernized ruling class as the Israeli left and the more kind of Semitic masses as the right. So it gets really confusing because, and that's what happens when you apply Western political framings to a society that's not very Western.
Yeah.
I apologize if I'm getting really far into the weeds.
No, that's all right. That's all right. It's our job
No,
to catch up.
you're fine.
That's why we're having this conversation. We are experiencing. Go ahead, Kia. Go ahead.
So I feel like also you have an interesting perspective because you lived in the U.S. before, right, for a short period of time. So with the anti-Semitism thing, is there a difference between the anti-Semitism that happens in New York, because New York is New York, and the anti-Semitism that may be happening right now and where you're actually living in the West Bank?
I would say that I try to think of anti-Semitism less as like a set of bigoted ideas and more of a system of oppression that benefits people. I think it's a system of oppression different from racism, different from Islamophobia. I think these are all different like systems of oppression that function differently. I think, for example, Jews are not pushed to the bottom of society. We're pushed to the middle, and we're given very visible inclusion. I think one of the ways anti-Semitism functions actually is that Jews tend to think of ourselves as more vulnerable than we are, and we're perceived by outsiders as more powerful than we are. I think that's just one of the ways. Like we always think of ourselves as punching up, and others see us as punching down. Whether we're talking about what happened, a year ago with Kanye or Whoopi Goldberg, I mean, the way the Jewish community reacts to this is like we think we're punching up. How dare these celebrities? We feel endangered, and what's happening now also makes a lot of Jews feel really vulnerable and endangered. But we're perceived from the outside as more powerful than we feel, and that's one of the ways I think anti-Semitism functions. But also we're often we're often pushed into the role of like middle agent oppressor. Like I would say this began in Europe. The Jews weren't the lords, we weren't the nobility, but we also weren't peasants. And in many places, the nobility would kind of enlist the Jew to oppress the peasant, collect the taxes, lend money
right.
And we would be like the oppressor that the peasant would see. Like the nobility was the power structure. People were really benefiting from the system. But when the peasants would really get fed up with their situation and want to lash out at their oppressor, they wouldn't go to the castle and burn it down. They would go to the Jewish community and do a pogrom.
Tax collector.
Right, sure.
Yeah.
Which
Zachariah, basically.
Right. And when you speak of the Kanyes and the Oprahs of the world, they're in the entertainment industry, and in a lot of cases,
Right.
the conversation is that most of the record companies, broadcast companies, in a lot of cases are owned by folks who are Jewish. And so that also is almost the same type of, it ain't about the power structure that's above. It is the power structure that people can see and feel like they can
Yeah.
touch a Lee or Cohen quicker than they can, folks that we may not know.
Right, right. So I think in the United States, a lot of Jews were kind of pushed into these roles. Some of them, like for example, just like public school teachers or social workers, where these Jews might have meant well, but they were kind of the face of an unjust system that was failing
Mm-hmm.
people in
Mm-hmm.
communities.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you had Jews who were slumlords and Jews who were exploitative, A&Rs and record company executives, and
Right.
that's also a role where they're not the power structure, they're not like at the top, but they're like the oppressor that the person at the bottom is experiencing and
Sure.
wants to lie against. And I think Israel, and to connect with what you're asking, I think Israel as a state has actually fallen into the trap of playing this role on a global level. I think Israel used to be, this kind of like attack dog of the United States, this like, or the Robin to America's Batman in West Asia, and I think that this actually is something Israel needs to break free from. I think one of the most important things Israel can do right now is actually become independent from the United States and side with the oppressed of the world and not the oppressors. I think that's something that Israel needs to do now that we're
that's a heavy lift.
And Netanyahu will never let that happen.
That's a heavy lift. I want to finish up with two things. We're experiencing something that I don't believe historically can never be matched. All the things you talked about happened 2,000 years ago. There were no social media, there was no cameras, there was no video. It was all written in ledgers. It was passed down by word of mouth. We are now experiencing every day this conflict. And what we know is that Israel has the weaponry, they have the power, they have visually, it looks like, as you mentioned, going back to what you just said, it almost feel like Israel is the attack dog, and that's what's being perceived. And that's really got the world in a conversation that I don't believe we've ever had. And so being on the ground there in Israel when this is going on, and this perception is going on worldwide, we know that your perceived enemy or your real enemy are getting a lot of sympathizers because of what is going on. Because let's just keep it real. You see babies being killed. It's hard for people to stomach that and not say there's got to be a better way than this. You said on our show, when I asked a question about the two-state solution, you said that's dead. It's not going to happen.
Right.
What is the solution that folks on the ground want to see?
Well, I can tell you what I want to see.
Okay.
What I would like to see is a one-state solution from the river to the sea, including Gaza, that if we're able to really understand the core grievances and aspirations of Jews and Palestinians, then I'm very confident we could create a one-state reality that is simultaneously, subjectively experienced by both peoples as the fulfillment of our aspirations. And that means a democratic, fully inclusive state between the river and the sea, that Palestinians experience full equality, full inclusion, and Jews are still experiencing as a deeply Jewish state. Not the skin of the state, but really the organs and the skeleton of the state. So, just the way our economy is structured, the way our, all of our policies and institutions are structured should be expressing something that's deeply Jewish, but really only recognizable to somebody with a Jewish education. Whereas somebody who doesn't have that education would just see a well-functioning, fully equal democratic society. And I think if we can do that, if we can create a one-state reality that is really the expression of what both of us want, then we can live here together at peace. But that's really the only way, and I don't think we're close to that yet, unfortunately. I think Israeli society is still developing. Like I said, we came back to life only 75 years ago after 2,000 years of really, really traumatic oppression. And we haven't really healed from that yet. We still haven't healed from that. And in many ways, Palestinians are the victims of us not healing from that. They just happen to be like the enemy right in front of us. And I think that, right now, this round of violence, look, Hamas did something that, we could say is actually quite brilliant. they're a hybrid. We haven't really seen this before. I mean, Hezbollah might be an example of this as well, but we're talking about a kind of like an anti-colonial guerrilla movement that's simultaneously a state or a mini state. And this is like kind of, and they're still using these anti-colonial tactics that I mentioned earlier are just counterproductive when used against us. But they're doing it with like the resources and means of like a small state. They build like
they're the governing body of that community, right?
But what they've done is they've created a situation, and this is really why this is really the reason why Israel hasn't taken out Hamas years ago. What they did was they created a situation where the only way we can fight Hamas is to cut through their civilian population. So for many years, Israeli decision makers were just saying it's not worth it. We'll just let Hamas be there. We don't want that kind of death toll. We don't want to kill Palestinian civilians in Gaza at that level. It'll look bad, not necessarily because we're concerned about them, just, let's say because it'll look bad. We don't want to do it. And we'll just let Hamas stay there, and hopefully they'll just become a responsible state actor. But on October 7th, we realized that wasn't going to happen. On October 7th, we realized we can't let Hamas stay there anymore. And so Israel made a decision. We are taking out Hamas. But the only way to do that, just because of the way Hamas positioned itself, like all of its major bases, all of its rocket launchers, all of its command centers are under the civilian population in this tunnel network. So Israel really has no choice. If we're going to fight Hamas, we have no choice but to cut through the civilian population. And if we're not willing to do that, we cannot fight Hamas. That's just the way Hamas has positioned itself. Quite frankly, I think it's brilliant. I respect it. I'm not saying this to take anything away from them. I just think from a tactical perspective, it really pushed Israel into a corner. Clearly, when there's a high civilian death toll, that puts a lot more pressure internationally on Israel than it does on Hamas. So I think it was really brilliant on their end. But I just don't think it'll work in the long run because, at a certain point when Israel decides, like, we just can't allow this. What we saw on October 7th really shocked so much of not only our population, but the world. It was really like it was really unexpected. And I think what it taught Israeli society is we just can't allow this to exist anymore. We can't allow this to happen ever again. And again, they still have, over 100 hostages that we haven't gotten back yet. They're close to 200 hostages that we haven't gotten back yet. So we're just, I don't see us stopping. I don't see us allowing Hamas to continue ruling in Gaza. But like I said, I think the only thing Israel really can do, if we want to put a stop to this, is take Gaza back. Reverse what happened in 2005, go back to Gaza, dismantle Hamas completely, rebuild the Jewish communities that were destroyed there, and offer Palestinians in Gaza a better life together with us, eventually, ultimately, as equal citizens. I think anything short of that will not work. This country is too small to be divided into two states, and both of us are connected to the other side, meaning if this country were to be divided into two states, there'd be too many Palestinians and Israelis deeply connected to the parts of the country that we don't have. I think the only thing we can do is share the land in a way where we both feel like we've won in our subjective understandings of reality.
Before we let you go, geographically, kind of give us some perspective. How large is the state of Israel, if you were looking at it in an American perspective?
Roughly the size of New Jersey.
Oh,
wow,
that's not big.
And so how much of that area is there conflict going on right now? Are there areas where it's almost like you're far enough where you're not really feeling the conflict because it's not in your area, or is it pretty much the whole country?
It's in some ways it's kind of the whole country, but to different degrees. There are different. There might be different fronts of the conflict. For example, a lot of Israelis kind of evacuated the north because of the potential threat of Hezbollah. We don't know yet how that's going to play out. A lot of the Israelis who lived in the south, the communities that were attacked on October 7th, are not there yet. They haven't gone back yet because they don't feel, like meaning we have to neutralize Hamas. We have to deal with this. And the only thing, our security experts, believe me, the way our security experts work is they take what our needs are, what America demands, and they try to close that gap. That's basically the job of any Israeli security expert, to try and close the gap between what we need to protect ourselves and what the Americans demand of us. And right now, there's no way to close that gap, because the Americans, more than anything else, want us to stay out of Gaza. They don't want us going back to Gaza. They don't care how many Palestinians we kill, but they don't want us back in Gaza like before 2005. And we know that the only way we're going to be able to protect the south of our country and fulfill our obligations to our citizens is to be back in Gaza. So for me, I'm 100% convinced we have to be back in Gaza, but I just want it to be good for Palestinians. I want it to be an improvement for them from Hamas rule, and not a step down.
We appreciate you, man. I just it's so difficult, as I mentioned, to witness this from afar. And I think a lot of African Americans, we're looking at it and we're trying to understand, what our role is in a lot of this, because there's a lot of conversation going on here in the States. A lot of black folks, a lot of black intelligentsia, they're supporting the Palestinians. And because I think there's always this lean towards black folks, kind of being more sympathetic to the oppressed, what is perceived to be the oppressed, right? And then when you see all of these kids being killed, and as you mentioned, brother, even in your language, I understand your perspective because we're having a philosophical conversation here. But even if Americans don't care how many Palestinians are killed, that's just from a human standpoint. It's difficult to swallow, but it's an understanding that that's the way that it is, because it's almost like it's going to be flattened.
I mean, the government of the United States, the power structure. I don't mean the American people. When I talk about America, whether it's the Biden administration, the administration before him, the administration after him, at the end of the day, I'm just not convinced the U.S. power structure cares how many people are killed around the world. But they do want to make sure their interests are protected. And one of the U.S. interests here is that Israel retreat to pre-1967 borders. And that seems to have been consistent American policy for the last 50 some odd years.
Rabbi Yehuda, thank you so much for your time, brother, and be safe. And we're praying for peace for you guys every day.
Amen.
All right, great interview with the Rabbi. And, there's a few things I want to unpack. And some people may say, why do we care about, as black people, why do we care about what's going on in Israel? Here's two reasons that I want you guys to have perspective on. Many of us as black people are Christians, which means that every Sunday in church, we have been told that Israel is, that's it. That's where that's
the homeland.
People. That's the homeland, right? And so that's one reason why this is something that is important for us to be able to have perspective on, because every pastor is not going to have the courage to get in their pulpit, like some that are really aggressive right now, like, hey, watch your face. Jamal Bryant, it's every Sunday is really focusing on this Palestinian position. He is. There are others there are other Christian pastors that are now. This has been a line in the sand for a lot of those pastors that have been sitting in their pulpits for years, supporting Israel without question, and now they are questioning. The other group of people, our black intelligentsia, some of our professors and people who are learned. They're not afraid to come out and speak against Israel and support the Palestinians. And as I mentioned in the interview, that we tend to support the oppressed. And in this scenario, the Palestinians seem like they are the oppressed. What we do know is that there's still a lot that we need to learn. Some comments we've seen on TikTok and other things will be posted content. But great content, great interview, I believe.
Yeah, it's definitely a great interview. He did say something that made me uncomfortable, but I get what he was saying when he said that how Hamas is dealing with everything is brilliant because they are the people. You can't, they have meshed themselves with these people. They've made themselves the government. It's hard to meld which one is which. And when you think about it, that's what a lot of terrorist organizations and a lot of cults do. They mesh you and they recognize your pain and your suffering and want to make it better. And I see you, I understand you, and we're this and we're that. And then it goes to a different place you never expected. So, that made me uncomfortable. I get what he was saying. And, it's a lot.
There's a lot of nuance to it. Yeah,
there's
a lot of, we'll get back to some ratchet before we get out of here, but there's a lot of nuance to this conversation that is going to affect us, because if you think we were over there in Afghanistan and Iraq and it has nothing to do with this, then
you're dumb.
Yeah, you need to grow up, because this is a part of the conversation. Yeah. All right, if you want to catch any more of that, and if you missed any part of it, it's across all the socials. It is on Facebook. It is on YouTube. You can go back and check it out. Follow us on TikTok. We got a few of those clips out there. All right, before we get up out of here, couple of stories we did not.
There's only one ratchet subject.
What?
There's one ratchet subject. We just got to cover it now. We got to talk about T.I. and his son King at the Falcons game. We have to.
Where is my?
You on the soundboard?
No, I'm this.
Now I don't know if you can pull it up. Jesus, take the wheel.
You go ahead and talk about it. Let me see if I can pull it up. Go ahead, talk about.
Okay, so while he's trying to pull it up, so T.I.'s son King, we all know King. He's the light-skinned one that got the sideshow bob hair with the Mr. Ed teeth. Like, he paid for those teeth. Like, it was just a lot of teeth.
That's the only reason why you want to do this. You want to talk about his teeth and talk about his son. Yeah, go on.
That's not why. You a hater. So they were at the Falcons game because they had a tribute to 50 years of hip hop at the Falcons game, and it was amazing. They had Ludacris dropping down from the ceiling. They had T.I. leading him out the tunnel. It was amazing. And in the skybox, in the owner's box where T.I. was with a lot of the other performers, there is a conversation that King is having with somebody where he is saying he stands on business and that he grew up poor. He lived at my grandma's house. You're always telling people that we're this, we're that. His parents, who are both multi-platinum artists, multi-millionaires, are like, you didn't grow up in the hood. What are you talking about? And you can see the conversation with his parents. Like, he was talking, not reckless, but he was calling them the N-word. Here's the video. I don't know if the audio is going to play.
It can play. I'm just waiting for you to finish your diatribe, but go ahead.
Okay. He is calling his parents the N-word. He's cussing, and his parents come at him. But at first, that his parents are coming at him in like a parent, I'm going to mess with you so you can stop talking. And, you this, you're that. And, just funny. You sucked on the passy. That's why you want to go to your grandma's house. You live behind the gates. And then it goes into King getting very defensive. His parents having to tell him, you're embarrassing us. You got to stop. And T.I. actually putting him in a headlock. And a lot of people are like, I can't believe then T.I. went to, perform. Well, what he's supposed to do? Say, no, fans, I can't perform for you because I had to beat the crap out of my child. Like, what? But here's the argument. You can't. I know you.
So it's a whole lot of that. It's what it is if at the Falcons Stadium they have these suites, and they probably were in one of the suites. That was his mama. This might not be the perspective from his mother. I think it is. With Tiny from Escape. For people who don't, well, you see right there in the picture on the screen.
Escape, who wrote No Scrubs, all that Tiny. Tiny.
Hold on. No, you better stop. Well, Candy be like, they ain't write Scrubs. I wrote Scrubs. That's Candy.
No. Tiny and Candy wrote that song together.
Oh, okay. Well, you talking something. So, but here's the thing. T.I. is an interesting dude. He just cut a ribbon on some low income housing. He converted a shopping mall into. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. And he's Atlanta, up, down, sideways, and forwards. He's Atlanta.
Absolutely.
And he's but he's new rich Atlanta, right? And so people here in Atlanta will know what I'm talking about. Come on, son. You privileged. Yeah, you talking about you ain't never ate out that silver spoon. You's a daggum lie. Ain't nowhere in the world you can sit up and tell me your parents been rich your entire life. Like, you ain't never known
your
struggle.
Entire life.
Yeah, Escape been out 30 years. Truth be told, Tip been out pushing 20 years.
20 years.
And let him tell it, he was a dope boy before that. So, he probably wasn't, he ain't been broke for a while. You want to run about, the other video that's circulating now about him, at his grandma's house, him crying, he want to be his own artist and all this type of stuff. This is that growing pain stuff. I don't know how old he is now. I don't know if he's 20, 22. I don't know where he's in that range.
I don't know how old that child is.
I don't know how old he is, but as the old folks would say, he's smelling himself, and so T.I. did what he's supposed to do as a father. Which, how old is he?
That boy is 19.
Yeah, he's 19 years old, man. He's a kid.
He is still a child. This boy is a child.
Right, and so kudos to T.I. for not only snatching them up in that video that's circulating, or at least not snatching them up, but telling the mothers and the grandmothers to back up off of him, stop calling him. And in this situation, He snatched his son up, and
he did.
19.
He had every right to do so. So let me tell you something. You got big nerve, 19-year-old. How do you think you got in the owners in an owner suite at a Falcons game? That wasn't off business. That wasn't you standing on business that got you up there. That was your mother and father's wealth, success, and prominence that have you sitting in that box. So for you to act like, oh, I got here on my own. I'm on business. No, sweetie, nobody knows your music. Only reason people know who you are, King Harris, is because you have a very distinct look. You got this weird albino big teeth thing going on that people. But no, I said it for a reason. If you saw his brothers and sisters, could you pick any of them out of a lineup? If they walk past you or down the street holding hands right now, could you go, oh, that's T.I. and Tiny's daughter, son, the other ones? No, it's because King looks a specific way that we can go, oh, that's Day Boy. Ugh.
Well, he kind of looked like his mama, so that's but. I don't really get into those, especially with these kids and letting them. And here's the thing about Atlanta is too small. And cats like T.I. reaches too far. That's another thing. But these kids. And here's the funny thing: they live not too far from where we live. They're south of the city. They don't live. And that's a lot of people don't understand. Chris Tucker's and the Shaqs and the T.I.s and a lot of them live down south of the city because people are afraid to come below I-20. Think nothing going on down here. And these folks love it. So anyway, all right. So before we get out of this, let's we got a short list. Tiana Taylor and
there was one more thing. Tiffany Haddish back with another DUI.
Tiffany Haddish, another DUI, another situation. I saw her on a video recently. I don't know if it was. I think somebody posted something that happened before the DUI, but she was screaming about being nice. She tired of being nice and she cussing everybody out and blah 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 blah. She may be having a lot of these actors and people in the entertainment business. They weren't working for the last 6 months, right? There was no movies being made, nothing to keep them busy, and some of them folks got into some trouble.
But she wasn't getting hired before. So
Kevin Hart put her in there a couple of years. She get a movie and she had to stand up. Now let's not act like she ain't successful. Tiffany Haddish is successful. Let's not front on her.
Oh, God.
But these DUIs and these issues is going to be a problem. She better tighten up.
Here's the thing. Even if you're struggling, Tiffany, you couldn't hire a car service because I know hiring a car service is expensive. But Uber and Lyft is not expensive. I know you can afford Uber and Lyft. You weren't even drunk on the side of the road. You were drunk in traffic, passed out in your car.
Some people get to the point that celebrity, hits them differently. Let's keep an eye on the strike too, because I saw that the dude is from who played on what's the show with Insecure. That played one of the dudes that dated Issa Rae. He's a activist / Kendrick. His name is Kendrick something.
The light-skinned one with the depression issues on the show. Got it. Yes, I know who you're talking about.
So he has been really, really active, and I thought I put it in our production sheet. But let him tell it. This situation went down with this strike. Ending didn't really go down the way that it was portrayed. It was basically like they announced that the strike was over before they even cleared it with the actors themselves. And I'm not sure if it's, I'm gonna go ahead and apologize in advance if there's profanity in this show. All right, welcome back to Life on Circle Radio. As we mentioned, we had brother Rabbi Yehuda on our program about a month ago when we talked about this. Not to sing no one to grab. This is sing no one to grab. So this is Kendrick.
Bunch of y'all about to be real mad at me. What the is new? And people are always mad at me. For real different time right now. And I'm one of the more, not the most, but one of the more privileged actors. And I'm about to lose my house. Downsizing for me means people's salaries, means support for my family. Social justice work, fighting for Black liberation, diminishing because of our capacity, resources. You know what I'm saying? Capacity. Downsizing for me and for Black people means less infrastructure and protection for our stories in the industry. At a time where it's needed more than ever because of the attack on Black stories and the rise in white supremacy. All this shit has got to be worth it if we've been doing this for 5 months, almost 6 months, no income. So I ain't taking this shit lightly. I'm really pissed about it because I know so many people have been hurt already by this strike and that people need to get back to work. But reality is that it seems like they gonna make it harder. They trying to pull the okie doke wolf tickets, so.
My questions for leadership and members to think about. 1, why did the press get notified before membership was alerted of an end to the strike? 2, You say the AMPTP threatened to cancel shows. Why is this an acceptable reason for stopping negotiations? Is this not classic fear-mongering that the AMPTP is famous for? Why was the official union language strike is over, and I quote, when technically the strike was actually suspended, and not only did the membership nor the national board not yet vote for the tentative agreement, they haven't even had the opportunity to read it. 3, you say we used all leverage we could, but this is inherently not true. Why did we never call for a boycott on streaming companies? If you are so passionate about the inimitable value of humans in performance, why did we not secure this definition in negotiations? We know historically that it has never happened where membership has not ratified the contract after a national board approval. In my opinion, it is fear-mongering from our own union leadership to tell us that a worse deal is expected should we stand for better terms.
So that is on Kendrick's Instagram. I follow him, and he's one of the folks who kind of. So it sounds to me this situation didn't really resolve itself the way we've been told it resolved himself, and so
it sounds like the media is full of crap. It sounds like they fed something to make people more happy their shows were coming back, when in reality, nothing has changed.
The media artists are partners with the industry. They are in the industry. Right. So, yes, absolutely. And there's still issues with this AI technology and people. That still amazes me that someone can come on a set for one day, get paid $100, and they can use your face, name, and likeness for perpetuity for forevermore. Crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. All right. Well, great show. We appreciate y'all, everybody, for tuning in today, checking us out. Make sure you guys share us all on the socials, share us on the Tickety Talks and on the YouTube, and follow us and all that good stuff. We appreciate y'all. We'll talk to y'all next week.